The old greenhouse smelled like earth and possibility, and Chen stood at the counter of the Riverside Community Seed Library, carefully labeling tiny paper envelopes filled with last season's harvest when the most unlikely visitor walked through her door. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and completely out of place among the recycled shelving units and hand-painted signs. His charcoal suit probably cost more than her entire monthly budget, and the watch on his wrist caught the afternoon light filtering through the glass panels overhead. Everything about him screamed money and power, yet his dark eyes held something unexpected as they swept across the rows of seed packets, genuine curiosity. Mara brushed a strand of black hair behind her ear, leaving a smudge of soil on her cheek without realizing it. "Can I help you?" "I hope so." His voice was deep, steady. "I'm looking for someone who can teach me about growing things." She raised an eyebrow. Most people who wandered in were experienced gardeners looking to trade seeds, or families wanting to start small vegetable patches. This man looked like he had never touched dirt in his life. "Growing things is a pretty broad category. Are you interested in vegetables, flowers, herbs?" "All of it." He stepped closer to the counter, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something cleaner like cedar. "I have land. A lot of land, actually, and I want to use it properly." Mara set down her pen, intrigued despite herself. "How much land are we talking about?" 23 acres in the valley. The estate came with the property I purchased 6 months ago." He extended his hand across the counter. "I'm Ethan Mercer." She recognized the name immediately. Everyone in Riverside knew about Ethan Mercer, the billionaire who had bought the old Whitmore estate and its surrounding properties. The newspapers had speculated endlessly about why someone with his wealth and connections would relocate to their small agricultural town, instead of staying in San Francisco, where his company headquarters remained. Mara wiped her palm on her worn jeans before shaking his hand. "Chen, I run the seed library here." "I gathered that." His grip was firm, warm. "The woman at the hardware store said you were the person to talk to. She said you know more about seeds and sustainable growing than anyone in 3 counties. Mrs. Patterson exaggerates." But Mara felt a flush of pride anyway. She had spent 5 years building this seed library from nothing, creating a place where gardeners could borrow seeds for free, grow them out, and return a portion of the harvest to keep the cycle going. It was her life's work, even if it barely paid enough to keep the lights on. "I don't think she does." Ethan glanced around the greenhouse again, taking in the careful organization, the hand-drawn charts showing companion planting relationships, the small demonstration beds visible through the back windows. "This place is remarkable. Thank you." Mara felt herself warming to him despite the obvious wealth gap between them. There was no condescension in his tone, no hint that he thought her operation was quaint or insignificant. "So you want to turn 23 acres into gardens?" "I want to turn it into something meaningful." He leaned against the counter, suddenly looking less like a corporate titan and more like a man searching for purpose. "I've spent 15 years building a manufacturing empire. We make industrial equipment, machinery for agriculture and construction. The work is profitable, necessary even, but it's not creative. Everything is steel and circuits and profit margins. I bought the estate because I needed space, quiet, somewhere to think, but the land there is just grass. Maintained, sterile grass that serves no purpose except to look neat." Mara understood immediately. "You want to create instead of maintain." "Exactly." His eyes lit up, and she noticed how it changed his entire face, making him look younger, more approachable. I want to plant things, grow things, see them change with the seasons. But I don't know where to start. My mother had a garden when I was young, before my father's business took over our lives. I remember the smell of tomatoes warming in the sun, the way she would cut fresh basil for dinner. That's the last time I felt connected to anything real. Something in Mara's chest tightened at the loneliness in those words. She had grown up in her grandmother's gardens, learning to save seeds and read soil and understand the language of plants before she could properly read books. She could not imagine a life disconnected from the earth, from the cycles of growth and harvest. "Okay," she said, making a decision that would change everything. "Let me close up here, and I'll come take a look at your property. We can assess what you have to work with, what your soil composition is like, and start planning something appropriate for your climate zone and personal goals." Ethan's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes and crinkling the corners. "Really? Just like that? The Seed Library exists to promote sustainable growing and food security. If you're serious about using 23 acres to grow actual food and create habitat, then helping you falls directly under my mission." She started gathering her things: a soil testing kit, her weather-beaten notebook, a measuring tape. Plus, I'm curious, not many billionaires walk in here asking for gardening advice. "How did you know I'm a billionaire?" He looked amused rather than offended. "Mercer Industrial Systems. I may spend most of my time with my hands in the dirt, but I do read the newspaper." Mara locked the cash box, which contained exactly $37 in donations. "Your company manufactured the new irrigation system for the county's agricultural extension. It was in all the local press. Guilty." He held the door open as she turned off the lights and locked up. "And for the record, I'm glad you read the newspaper instead of the tabloids. They have some very creative theories about why I moved here. Let me guess. Secret love child, hiding from the mob, witness protection." She was teasing now, falling into an easy rhythm despite having known him for less than 15 minutes. All three, according to different sources. Ethan led her to a vehicle that looked completely wrong in the gravel parking lot. A sleek black SUV that probably cost more than most people's houses. "The truth is much simpler. I burned out. Completely. I was working 18-hour days, sleeping in the office more often than not, and I realized one morning that I couldn't remember the last time I had done something just because I wanted to, not because it served a business purpose." Mara climbed into the passenger seat, which was more luxurious than any furniture she owned. "So you bought an estate in wine country and decided to become a gentleman farmer. When you say it like that, it sounds like a cliché. If the expensive boot fits." But she was smiling, and so was he. The drive to the Whitmore estate took 20 minutes through rolling hills covered in vineyards and orchards. Mara had lived in Riverside her entire life, but she had never been past the stone gates that marked the estate's entrance. The long driveway wound through ancient oak trees before opening onto a vista that made her breath catch. The main house was a beautiful blend of Spanish colonial and modern architecture, all white stucco and dark wood beams, with terraced levels that seemed to grow naturally from the hillside. But it was the land that captured her attention. Acre upon acre of gently sloping terrain with rich, dark soil and perfect sun exposure. In the distance, she could see a small lake glinting in the afternoon light. "This is incredible," she said softly. "The Whitmores never did anything with all this." Old money rarely needs to be productive. Ethan parked near the house but made no move to go inside. They used maybe 2 acres for the immediate grounds, and the rest was just kept as empty pasture. The real estate agent kept emphasizing the development potential, how I could subdivide and sell parcels for premium prices. Please tell me you're not going to do that. Not a chance. He opened his door and the fresh air rushed in, carrying the scent of wild grasses and distant lavender. Come on, I'll show you around. They spent the next 2 hours walking the property as the sun dropped lower in the sky, painting everything gold and amber. Mara took soil samples, tested pH levels, made notes about drainage patterns and microclimates. Her initial assessment was even better than she had hoped. The soil was rich and loamy, with good structure and minimal contamination. The previous owners had never used industrial pesticides or fertilizers, which meant the land could easily transition to organic growing methods. "You have something special here," she told Ethan as they stood on a rise overlooking the eastern section of the property. "This soil is living, healthy. You could grow almost anything." "What would you grow, if this was yours?" He was watching her instead of the land, and something in his gaze made her pulse quicken. Mara looked out across the acres, letting herself dream. "I would create zones. Food forest on the northern slope where you have those established trees. Intermix fruit and nut trees with berry bushes and perennial vegetables. Terraced gardens here on the southern exposure for annual crops. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, all the things that love full sun. The area near the lake would be perfect for a wetland garden. Rice, water chestnuts, cranberries. And I would leave wild spaces, corridors for pollinators and beneficial insects." That sounds like something out of a storybook. It's just good design. But she was smiling, caught up in the vision. Permaculture principles say you should create systems that are productive, sustainable, and beautiful. This land could be all three. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching the light change across the valley. "Would you help me do it? Not just plan it, but actually implement it." "I can pay you properly, treat it like a consulting contract, whatever rate you think is fair." Mara's first instinct was to refuse. She had the seed library to run, and taking on a project this size would be a massive commitment. But the opportunity to transform 23 acres into a thriving, productive ecosystem was everything she had ever dreamed of doing. And if she was honest with herself, there was something about Ethan Mercer that intrigued her, something beyond his obvious wealth and good looks. He seemed genuinely interested in learning, in getting his hands dirty and doing the work himself, rather than just hiring landscapers to execute someone else's vision. "I'll help you," she said. "But I have conditions. This can't be a vanity project that you lose interest in after a few months. Growing things takes time, patience, and consistent effort. I need to know you're serious." "I'm serious." He met her eyes directly. "I need this, Mara. I need something real in my life, something that grows and changes and exists outside of quarterly reports and board meetings." "Name your conditions. You do the physical work. I'll teach you, guide you, but you plant the seeds. You water, you weed, you harvest. You learn by doing, not by watching." "Agreed." "We start small and expand gradually. I know you probably want to transform all 23 acres at once, but that's not how sustainable systems work. We'll begin with a manageable area, maybe 2 or 3 acres, and add more each season as you learn." "That makes sense. And the seed library comes first." "I'll work with you in the afternoons and weekends, but my mornings are for the library and the community members who depend on it." "Of course." Ethan extended his hand again. "Deal." She shook on it, and this time neither of them let go immediately. His hand was warm and strong, and she found herself wondering what those hands would look like covered in soil, planting seedlings in the earth. They started the next Saturday. Mara arrived at sunrise with her truck loaded with tools, seed trays, and the beginnings of what she called their starter garden. Ethan met her wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt that showed off arms more muscular than she had expected. He must work out regularly to maintain that build, she thought, then immediately scolded herself for noticing. "Ready to get dirty?" she asked, pulling on her work gloves. "More than ready." He grabbed a shovel from her truck like he knew what to do with it. "Have you done manual labor before?" "I started in my father's factory, working the floor before I ever saw the inside of the executive offices. I know my way around hard work." He followed her to the plot they had marked out the previous week, a half-acre section with ideal sun exposure and gentle drainage. "Where do we start?" "We start with the soil." Mara knelt and plunged her hands into the earth, scooping up a handful. "Feel this. Really feel it." Ethan crouched beside her and took the soil she offered. He rubbed it between his fingers, testing the texture. "It's alive." "Exactly." She was pleased he understood immediately. Healthy soil is a living ecosystem. Millions of microorganisms, beneficial fungi, earthworms, all working together to break down organic matter and make nutrients available to plants. Our job is to support that system, not fight against it. They spent that first day preparing the beds, working compost into the soil and laying out the garden grid. Mara showed Ethan how to use string lines to keep rows straight, how to gauge proper spacing, how to read the subtle variations in soil color that indicated different mineral compositions. He was a quick study, asking intelligent questions and actually listening to the answers instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. By noon, they were both sweating in the spring sunshine. Mara pulled out the lunch she had packed, sandwiches on homemade bread, carrot sticks, and thermoses of cold herb tea. "You made this?" Ethan asked, biting into his sandwich. "The bread, yes. The vegetables came from my own garden. The turkey is from the grocery store, so I can't take full credit." She sat on the ground, not bothering with the folding chairs he had brought out from the house. "Everything tastes better when you're hungry from real work. I'm discovering that." He joined her on the ground, stretching out his legs. "My chef makes excellent food, but it's always so complicated, so fussy. This is simple and perfect." "You have a chef?" He came with the house. "Part of the estate management staff." Ethan looked almost embarrassed. "I tried to downsize, but Mrs. Rodriguez threatened to quit if I let Carlos go, and I can't lose her. She's the only one who knows how the heating system works." Mara laughed, the sound bright in the quiet garden. "The trials of the wealthy." "I know how it sounds," but he was laughing too. "For what it's worth, I grew up solidly middle class. My father built his business from nothing, and we had plenty of lean years before things took off. This level of wealth is still strange to me sometimes." "What changed?" "Dad died when I was 24, heart attack at his desk." Ethan's voice went quiet. "I inherited the company before I was ready, and I threw myself into growing it because I thought that's what he would have wanted. By the time I looked up, 15 years had passed, and I had everything except the things that actually matter." Mara understood loss. Her grandmother had died 3 years ago, leaving her the seed collection that had become the foundation of the library. "Is that why you're doing this? Building something he would have been proud of?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm trying to build something that makes me proud of myself." He met her eyes, and there was a vulnerability there that she had not expected from a billionaire CEO. Does that make sense? Complete sense. She wanted to reach out and touch his arm, offer comfort, but they had only known each other a week. Instead, she said, "The gardens will be something to be proud of. I promise you that." They worked until sunset, and by the end of the day they had prepared half the beds and planted the first seeds. Early spring crops like lettuce, spinach, radishes, and peas. Mara gave Ethan careful instructions about watering and showed him how to check soil moisture. "These will germinate in 5 to 7 days, she told him. "And you'll see your first seedlings break the surface. It never stops being magical, watching something grow from a tiny seed." "I'll water them every morning," Ethan promised. "And I'll send you pictures when they come up." That became their routine. Mara spent mornings at the seed library, helping community members select varieties and teaching workshops on seed saving and sustainable growing. Afternoons and weekends, she drove out to the estate and worked beside Ethan in the expanding gardens. He was true to his word about doing the physical work. She watched his hands become calloused, saw him learn to move with the rhythms of the garden rather than fighting against them. He sent her photos every morning. The first green shoots of lettuce emerging from dark soil, the unfurling leaves of pea plants, the bright orange flowers of nasturtiums she had planted as companion crops. Within a month, their half-acre starter garden was thriving. They expanded to a full acre, adding tomatoes and peppers, squash and beans, herbs and flowers. Mara taught Ethan about succession planting, about how to stagger crops so the harvest would continue all season rather than coming all at once. She showed him how to identify beneficial insects and how to hand-pick the harmful ones without resorting to pesticides. "Everything is connected," she explained one afternoon as they worked on building trellises for the climbing beans. "The flowers attract pollinators and predatory insects that eat the pests. The deep-rooted plants break up compacted soil and bring up nutrients from lower layers. The nitrogen-fixing legumes feed the heavy feeders like tomatoes and squash. If you design it right, the garden takes care of itself. You talk about it like it's alive, like it has its own intelligence." Ethan was tying twine to create a support structure, his hands steady and sure. "It does, in a way. Plants communicate through fungal networks in the soil. They warn each other about pests, share resources, even recognize their kin." She loved this part, sharing the science that made gardening feel like magic. "We're not creating these systems. We're just facilitating what nature already knows how to do." He stopped working and looked at her with something she could not quite name in his eyes. "How did you get so wise about all this?" "I'm not wise, I'm just paying attention." But she felt heat rise to her cheeks under his gaze. "My grandmother taught me." She learned from her grandmother, who brought seeds with her when she immigrated from China. Some of the varieties in the seed library are over 100 years old, passed down through generations of careful saving. "That's incredible." Ethan set down his tools and moved closer. "You're preserving history, not just seeds." "That's exactly what it is." Mara was acutely aware of how close he was standing, how the sun caught in his dark hair, how his forearms looked strong and capable as he rolled up his sleeves. Seeds are stories. Every variety has been shaped by the people who grew it, selected it, saved it year after year. When we lose a seed variety to industrial agriculture, we lose all those stories. "Show me your favorites," he said suddenly. "Come on, let's drive back to the seed library. I want you to show me the seeds that matter most to you." It was impulsive and unnecessary, but Mara found herself agreeing. They drove back to town in the golden late afternoon light, and she unlocked the greenhouse that had become her second home. Inside, she pulled out the special cabinet where she kept the rarest varieties, the ones she was most carefully stewarding. "This is my grandmother's variety of long beans," she said, opening a carefully labeled envelope. She selected for this specific shade of purple, and for the way they stay tender even when they grow 2 feet long. "And these are the winter melons her mother brought from Guangdong province. The seeds are over 80 years old, but they still germinate beautifully." Ethan examined each envelope she handed him with reverence. "I want to grow these. Will you trust me with them?" "Are you sure? These are challenging. The long beans need specific support structures and the winter melons take up a lot of space." "I'm sure." His voice was firm. "I want to grow the things that matter to you. I want to be part of keeping these stories alive." Something shifted between them in that moment. This was no longer just a billionaire hiring a consultant to design his hobby garden. This was personal, intimate even. He was asking to be trusted with her family's legacy, and somehow that felt more significant than anything else they had shared. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll plant them next week." They did, creating a special section of the garden dedicated to heirloom varieties and rare seeds. Mara showed Ethan how to construct tall trellises for the long beans and sprawling frames for the winter melon vines. She taught him the specific growing requirements for each variety, the little tricks her grandmother had passed down. "These beans need to be picked every 3 days once they start producing," she explained. "If you let them stay on the vine too long, the plant stops making new flowers. It thinks its job is done. So we have to trick it into thinking it never achieves its goal." Ethan was taking notes in a small leather journal he had started carrying. "Basically, same with squash and cucumbers. Harvest frequently and the plants produce more, trying to fulfill their evolutionary imperative to make seeds. Nature is ruthless. Nature is efficient." She smiled at him across the bed they were planting. "And we get to eat well because of it." As spring turned to early summer, the gardens exploded with growth. The lettuce and radishes they had planted first had already been harvested, and Ethan had insisted on sharing the produce. Half went to the seed library for distribution to community members, and half he kept for his own kitchen. Carlos, his chef, had been delighted with the fresh vegetables and had started creating menus around whatever was ready in the garden. "You should come to dinner," Ethan said one Saturday evening as they were finishing up the day's work. "Carlos has been begging to cook for the person responsible for all these amazing ingredients." Mara hesitated. Working together in the garden was one thing. Having dinner at his estate felt different, more like a date. "I don't know. It's just dinner. And Carlos really is an exceptional chef." But there was something hopeful in his eyes that made her reconsider. "Okay, but I need to go home and clean up first. I'm covered in dirt." "So am I." He looked down at himself and laughed. "How about I pick you up in an hour?" She gave him her address, a small cottage she rented on the edge of town, and hurried home. In the shower, she tried to tell herself this was not a date, just a friendly dinner between colleagues. But she still found herself taking extra care with her appearance, choosing a sundress instead of her usual jeans, letting her long hair down instead of pulling it back in its work braid. When Ethan arrived, he had also cleaned up, trading his work clothes for dark slacks and a button-down shirt that made him look every inch the successful businessman. But his hands still bore the evidence of their work: calluses on his palms, dirt under his nails that had not quite scrubbed out. "You look beautiful," he said, and the sincerity in his voice made her stomach flip. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The drive back to the estate felt different than all the times before. There was an awareness between them now, an acknowledgement of the attraction that had been building over weeks of working side by side. When they arrived at the house, he led her not to the formal dining room but to a terrace overlooking the gardens, where a small table had been set with candles and simple, elegant place settings. Carlos had indeed prepared a feast. Salads made from their lettuce and radishes, grilled vegetables drizzled with herb-infused oil, fresh bread, and a light pasta with the first tiny tomatoes from the cherry varieties they had planted. Every dish showcased the garden's produce, and every bite was perfect. "This is amazing," Mara said. "Carlos is a magician." He said working with ingredients this fresh makes his job easy. Ethan poured wine into her glass, something local that complemented the meal perfectly. "But the magic is what you've taught me to grow. We grew it together." She met his eyes across the candlelight. "You did the work, Ethan. I just showed you how. You showed me more than that." He set down his fork, suddenly serious. "You showed me what my life was missing: purpose, connection, something real." Mara's heart was beating fast. "The gardens will keep growing. By next year, you'll have fruit trees producing, berries ripening, more vegetables than you know what to do with." "I'm not talking about the gardens." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm talking about you. These past 2 months have been the happiest I've been in years, and it's not just because I'm growing things. It's because I'm growing things with you." She should pull her hand back, keep things professional, but she did not want to. "Ethan, I don't know if this is a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're you and I'm me. Because you're a billionaire and I run a community seed library out of a donated greenhouse. Because our lives are completely different." "Are they?" He stood and walked around the table, pulling her gently to her feet. "We spend every afternoon working side by side. We talk about things that matter. You've seen me covered in dirt and sweat, and I've never heard you talk about my money except to tease me. What does the rest of it matter? People will think I'm with you for your money." "I don't care what people think." He cupped her face in his calloused hands. "Do you care what I think?" "Yes," she whispered. "I think you're brilliant and passionate, and the most genuine person I've ever met. I think I've been falling for you since the moment you told me my expensive boots were cliched. And I think, if you're honest with yourself, you might be falling for me too." He was right. Somewhere between teaching him to plant seeds and watching him learn to raid the soil, between his terrible first attempts at building trellises and his triumph when the first tomato ripened, she had fallen completely in love with Ethan Mercer. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, but the man who sent her photos of seedlings every morning and who talked to the plants while he watered them when he thought she was not listening. "I am," she admitted. "I'm falling for you, but Ethan, this is complicated. It doesn't have to be." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her lips. "Can I kiss you?" Instead of answering, she closed the distance between them. His lips were soft and sure, and the kiss tasted like wine and summer and possibility. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, feeling the strength in his body and the gentleness in his touch. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Okay," Mara said, "maybe it doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe it can just be 2 people who found something real together." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips again. "Stay tonight." "Not for anything except being together. I just want to fall asleep knowing you're here." She should go home, keep some boundaries, but she did not want to. "Okay." They did not make love that night, though they easily could have. Instead, they lay on the large couch in his living room, talking until late about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. He told her about the pressure of running a company that employed thousands of people, about the loneliness of never knowing if people liked him for himself or his wealth. She told him about losing her grandmother, about the struggle to keep the seed library funded, about her fear that everything she was working to preserve would be lost to industrial agriculture and corporate seed patents. "I can help with funding," he said. "The library shouldn't have to struggle." "No," she sat up, suddenly serious. "That's exactly what I was afraid of. I don't want to be a project you fund, Ethan. I don't want your money. I want us to be separate from all that." He pulled her back down against his chest. "Okay, I'm sorry. I just want to help. You are helping. You're learning, you're growing things. You're proving that sustainable agriculture can work on any scale. That's more valuable than money." "Then that's what I'll do." He kissed the top of her head. "But if you ever change your mind, if the library ever really needs help, you'll tell me. I'll tell you." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Mara woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and Ethan's arms still around her. He was already awake, watching her with soft eyes. "Good morning," he said. "Morning." She stretched, feeling happy in a way she had not in years. "I should get home and change. The library opens at 9. Or you could keep clothes here." He said it casually, but she heard the hope underneath. "Make this easier for the days you stay over. We've been together for 12 hours and you're already asking me to move in. Not move in. Just keep a drawer." But he was smiling. "Too fast." "Maybe a little," she kissed him softly, "but ask me again in a month." She did keep a drawer, though she made him wait 2 weeks before agreeing. Their relationship unfolded like the gardens, growing naturally and steadily with the season. She spent most evenings at the estate, and they fell into an easy rhythm of work and life together. The gardens continued to expand, now covering 3 acres of carefully designed and beautifully productive land. Word spread through the community about what they were doing. Other landowners started visiting, asking for advice on converting their own properties to sustainable growing. Mara began teaching workshops at the estate, showing groups how to build the kind of systems she and Ethan had created. He sat in on every session, sometimes adding his own perspective as someone who had started with zero knowledge. "The best part is getting your hands dirty," he told one group. "I spent years making decisions about agriculture from boardrooms and spreadsheets. Actually growing food taught me more about sustainable systems in 2 months than I learned in 15 years of business." Mara watched him speak and felt her heart swell. This was the man she loved, humble, enthusiastic, completely committed to learning and sharing what he had discovered. In late summer, the gardens reached peak production. They were harvesting bushels of tomatoes, peppers, squash, beans, and herbs daily. Ethan's kitchen could not possibly use it all, so they set up a farm stand at the end of the estate's driveway, offering the excess to the community for whatever people could afford to pay. Many paid nothing, and Ethan did not care. "This is what the land should be doing," he said, watching a family load their car with fresh vegetables. "Feeding people, creating abundance." The long beans produced exactly as Mara's grandmother had promised. Prolifically, with that distinctive purple color and tender texture. The winter melons sprawled across their trellises, growing massive fruits that would store for months. Every heirloom variety thrived, and Mara saved seeds from the best plants, adding new stock to the library's collection. On a warm September evening, as they walked through the gardens in the golden hour before sunset, Ethan stopped at the winter melon patch. "These are ready to harvest soon, right?" "Another few weeks. The stems need to dry and the skin needs to harden fully." She ran her hand over one of the massive fruits. "They'll last until spring if we store them properly. Your grandmother would be proud." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You've kept her legacy alive, and you've helped me build something I never knew I needed. We built it together." She leaned back against him, feeling safe and loved. "I never could have done this alone. The library helps individual gardeners, but what we have here, this shows what's possible on a larger scale. I've been thinking about that." His voice was careful, like he was trying out an idea. "What if we did this more? Not just teaching workshops, but actually helping people convert land to sustainable use. We could create a foundation, provide resources and education, maybe even buy up agricultural land and transform it into demonstration sites." Mara turned in his arms. "Ethan, that's a massive undertaking." "I know, but I have the money to fund it and you have the knowledge to guide it. We could do real good, Mara. We could change how people think about agriculture and land use." She saw the passion in his eyes, the same passion she had seen when he talked about wanting something real in his life. "You're serious about this?" "Completely, but only if you want to do it with me. I'm not trying to take over your work or make you dependent on my funding. This would be a partnership, equal in every way." He took her hands. "What do you think?" What she thought was that she loved this man, loved his vision, loved how he had taken what she taught him and expanded it into something bigger. "I think it's brilliant. But we need to make sure the seed library stays independent, stays community-run." "Absolutely. The foundation would be separate, something new we build together." He was getting excited now, talking faster. "We could hire staff, create educational programs, publish research. You'd be the director, obviously. I'd handle the business side, fundraising, operations." "Director," she laughed. "I've never directed anything except a one-woman seed library. You've directed the transformation of this entire property. You've taught dozens of people through your workshops. You're the most qualified person I know." He cupped her face, suddenly serious. "Marry me." Mara's heart stopped. "What?" "Marry me," he said again. "I know it's fast, but I've never been more sure of anything. I love you, Mara. I love how you see the world, how you've taught me to slow down and pay attention to what matters. I love your passion and your knowledge and the way you always have dirt under your nails. I want to spend the rest of my life growing things with you, building things with you, loving you." She was crying now, happy tears that blurred her vision. "We've been together for 4 months. And I've felt more like myself in these 4 months than I have in 15 years. He kissed her tears away. "But if it's too fast, I'll wait. I'll ask you again in a year, in 5 years, however long you need." "No." She was laughing and crying at the same time. "No, don't wait. Yes. My answer is yes." He kissed her then, deep and joyful, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around in the middle of the garden they had built together. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. "I don't have a ring," he said. "I didn't plan this, it just came out. I don't need a ring." But even as she said it, he was pulling something from his pocket, a small pouch made of fabric. "I don't have a ring," he repeated, "but I do have this." He opened the pouch and poured seeds into her palm, a mix of flowers, vegetables, and herbs. "Plant these with me. Let them be the start of everything we're going to grow together." It was perfect, so perfectly them that she started crying again. You ridiculous romantic billionaire. Is that a yes to planting the seeds? It's a yes to everything. They were married in October, when the gardens were heavy with harvest and the air had turned crisp. It was a small ceremony held right in the middle of the 3 acres they had transformed together. Mara wore a simple dress and a crown of flowers from the garden. Ethan wore his good suit with soil still under his fingernails, and neither of them could stop smiling. The community turned out in force. All the people Mara had helped through the seed library, all the landowners who had attended their workshops. Mrs. Rodriguez and Carlos catered with food from the estate's gardens. Toasts were made with wine from local vineyards, and everyone danced on the grass as the sun set over the valley. Happy? Ethan asked, holding her close as they swayed to music under string lights they had hung from the garden trellises. Completely. Mara rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. How did we get here so fast? We planted seeds and watched them grow. He kissed the top of her head. Some things just know how to thrive when they find the right conditions. After the wedding, they threw themselves into launching the foundation. Ethan handled the legal structure and initial funding, while Mara developed the programming and educational framework. They called it the Seeds of Change Foundation, and its mission was to promote sustainable agriculture through education, land conservation, and community support. The seed library remained independent, as Mara had insisted, but the foundation partnered with it to expand services. They hired staff to help with operations and created satellite seed libraries in neighboring communities. They purchased a 200-acre farm that had been slated for development and transformed it into a demonstration site and teaching facility. Mara threw herself into the work with the same passion she had always had, but now she had resources behind her vision. They hired experienced farmers, soil scientists, and educators. They offered free workshops and apprenticeships. They documented everything they did and published their findings open source, so anyone could replicate their methods. Ethan was true to his word about handling the business side. He understood bureaucracy and fundraising in ways that Mara never would, and he took genuine joy in using his business skills to support her vision. But he never stopped working in the gardens himself. Every morning, before the staff arrived and the program started, he spent an hour with his hands in the soil, tending the plants he and Mara had started together. Their first anniversary fell in early summer, when the gardens were once again lush with new growth. Ethan surprised her by taking the day off from foundation work and packing a picnic. "Where are we going?" Mara asked as he loaded baskets into the truck. "You'll see." He drove them up into the hills, to a property she had never seen before. 50 acres of open land with a small cabin and a year-round spring. The views were breathtaking, overlooking the entire valley. "What is this place?" she asked. "Ours. I bought it last month." He pulled her close, looking out over the land. "I thought maybe we could use it for something special. Not the foundation, just us. A place where we could experiment, try new varieties, maybe raise our kids someday if you want kids." "What do you think?" Mara's hand went to her stomach, where their first child was already growing, a secret she had been planning to share that evening. "I think it's perfect. And I think our daughter or son is going to love growing up here." Ethan stared at her, understanding dawning. "You're pregnant?" 3 months. I wanted to wait until I was sure before I told you." She was nervous suddenly. "Are you happy?" His answer was to lift her off her feet, spinning her around just like he had the night he proposed. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it." "Mara, "We're having a baby." They sat in the grass for hours, making plans and dreaming about the future. They would build a house on the property, design it to be sustainable and beautiful. They would plant orchards and berry patches where their children could play and learn. They would create a life rooted in the land, in the cycles of growth and harvest, in the simple truth that good things take time to grow. Their daughter was born in early spring, perfectly timed with the season of new beginnings. They named her Lily, and from her first days, she was surrounded by gardens and growing things. Mara strapped her into a carrier and took her to work at the foundation, where she napped in the shade while her parents taught workshops and consulted with farmers. The foundation grew beyond anything they had initially imagined. Within 3 years, they had helped transform over 1,000 acres of land to sustainable use. They had trained hundreds of new farmers and gardeners. They had successfully lobbied for policy changes that supported small-scale agriculture and seed saving. And through it all, Mara and Ethan remained hands-on, never losing touch with the dirt and the seeds that had brought them together. On a warm evening in late summer, 5 years after the day Ethan had walked into the seed library, Mara stood in the garden at their new property and watched her family. Lily, now 3, was helping Ethan harvest tomatoes, her small hands carefully picking the ripe ones just like he showed her. Their son, Marcus, was 1 year old and sitting in the dirt, happy covered in soil and examining every rock and leaf he could reach. The gardens around them were spectacular. 5 acres of food forest and annual crops, berry patches and herb spirals, all thriving under their care. The seed library was still operating, now run by a wonderful manager Mara had trained, freeing her to focus on the foundation and her family. The Seeds of Change Foundation was impacting communities across 3 states, helping people reconnect with the land and sustainable growing practices. But the thing Mara was most proud of was not the acreage or the programs or the policy changes. It was this: her family, her children growing up with dirt under their nails and wonder in their eyes, her husband who had transformed from a burned-out CEO into someone who measured success in harvests and healthy soil. Ethan caught her watching and smiled, that same smile that had caught her attention 5 years ago, now softened by contentment and love. He walked over with Lily on his hip and Marcus toddling beside him. "Look what we picked, Mama," Lily said, showing off her basket of tomatoes. "Beautiful," Mara said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Should we make sauce tonight?" "Yes. Can I help?" "Of course." Mara took Marcus from Ethan's arms and settled the baby on her hip. "You know what I was thinking about." "What's that?" Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling his whole family close. "That day you walked into the seed library. You looked so out of place in your expensive suit, asking about growing things." She laughed at the memory. "I never could have imagined all of this." "I could," Ethan said softly. "Maybe not the specifics, but I knew when I met you that my life was about to change. You taught me how to grow things, Mara. But more than that, you taught me how to live. We taught each other." She looked out over the gardens, heavy with late summer harvest, and we're still learning. Always. He kissed her temple, then her lips. "What should we plant for fall crops?" "I was thinking about trying that new variety of kale from the exchange program. And definitely more lettuce. We can never have enough salad greens. Whatever you want to grow, I'll plant it." It was a promise and a vow, the same one he made every season. "I know you will." She leaned into him, feeling the solid strength of his body, the warmth of her children, the rightness of this life they had built. "You always do." As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The Mercer family walked back to their house through gardens bursting with life. Lily chattered about the tomato sauce they would make. Marcus babbled happy nonsense, and Mara and Ethan held hands, their fingers intertwined like the roots of plants growing together. That night, after the children were in bed and the kitchen was clean, they stood on their porch and looked out at the land they tended. Every plant they had put in the ground, every seed they had saved, every system they had designed was a testament to what could grow when you started with something small and nurtured it with patience and love. "Do you ever miss the corporate world?" Mara asked, though she already knew the answer. "Not for a second." Ethan pulled her close. "This is real. This matters. Everything I have, everything I am, started the day I walked into that seed library and met you." "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too." He kissed her under the stars, in the garden they had grown together, surrounded by the life they had planted. Years continued to pass in cycles of planting and harvest. Lily started elementary school and immediately began a garden club, teaching her classmates about saving seeds and growing food. Marcus proved to have his father's aptitude for building things, constructing elaborate trellises and raised beds by the time he was 5. The foundation expanded internationally, helping communities around the world develop sustainable growing systems. But through all the growth and change, Myra and Ethan never lost sight of what mattered most. Every morning, they still walked through their gardens together, checking on plants and planning the season ahead. Every evening, they still cooked meals from their harvest, teaching their children where food came from and how to honor the land that provided it. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan surprised Mara by commissioning a beautiful sign for the seed library. Chen Memorial Seed Library, founded in honor of grandmother Chen and maintained through the dedication of Mara Chen Mercer. It was made from reclaimed wood from the original greenhouse and carved with images of the seeds that meant the most to her family's history. "You didn't have to do this," Mara said, crying happy tears as they installed it. "Yes, I did. Your grandmother's legacy, your legacy, it deserves to be recognized. You've touched so many lives, helped so many people learn to grow food and save seeds. This library will be here long after we're gone, still doing the work that matters." The library had indeed become a community institution, not just in Riverside, but as a model that had been replicated in dozens of towns. The seeds that Mara's grandmother had saved were now being grown in gardens across the country, their stories passed down along with planting instructions and recipes. The foundation's demonstration farm had become a destination, hosting school groups and aspiring farmers, policymakers, and researchers. Ethan had used his business connections to forge partnerships with agricultural universities and sustainable farming organizations, creating networks of knowledge sharing and support. But he never did it from a boardroom. Every meeting, every partnership discussion, every major decision was made while walking through gardens, with dirt under everyone's nails and plants growing all around them. When Lily turned 12, she asked if she could start her own seed-saving project, focusing on flowers that attracted pollinators. Mara helped her set up a small operation in one corner of the foundation's property, teaching her the same methods her grandmother had taught her. Watching her daughter carefully harvest seeds and label envelopes, Mara felt the deep satisfaction of knowing the tradition would continue into another generation. Marcus, at 10, was more interested in the engineering side of sustainable agriculture. He spent hours with his father designing water systems and optimizing garden layouts, using math and science to solve practical problems. Ethan encouraged every question, every experiment, seeing in his son the same curiosity and drive that had once fueled his corporate success, now channeled into something life-giving rather than simply profitable. On a crisp fall day, 15 years after their first meeting, Mara and Ethan took a rare day off from the foundation to hike up to a ridge overlooking all the properties they had transformed. From this vantage point, they could see the original 3 acres at the Whitmore estate, now surrounded by orchards and food forests. They could see the foundation's demonstration farm, its fields laid out in beautiful patterns of productivity. They could see their own property, where their children were probably working in the gardens under the supervision of Ethan's mother, who had moved to Riverside after retiring and discovered her own passion for growing things. "Look at all of this," Mara said softly. "When you walked into the seed library that day, did you ever imagine it would lead to this?" Ethan wrapped his arms around her, and they stood together looking out over the valley. "I imagined finding something real. I imagined getting my hands dirty and learning to grow things. But I never imagined falling so completely in love. With you, with this life, with everything we've built together." "The seeds you planted grew," she said, echoing his words from years ago. "Because you taught me how." He turned her to face him, and she saw everything in his eyes. 15 years of love, of partnership, of growing together through seasons and challenges and triumphs. "Every good thing in my life started with you, Mara. You and those little envelopes of seeds." She kissed him there on the ridge, with the wind blowing through the dried grasses and the valley spread out below them. Everything they had built, everything they had grown, it all came back to this. 2 people who had found each other and decided to plant something beautiful. That evening, they gathered the whole family for dinner on the terrace, where Ethan had first told Mara he was falling in love with her. The table was laden with food from their gardens: roasted vegetables, fresh bread, salads, and the last tomatoes of the season. Lily and Marcus told stories about their day, interrupted by their grandmother, who had her own tales of garden adventures. Carlos, still their chef and now a friend, had outdone himself with the meal, turning simple ingredients into something spectacular. After dinner, as the sun set and the first stars appeared, Ethan stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said. 15 years ago I was lost. I had money and success, and absolutely no idea what to do with my life. Then I walked into a seed library and met a woman who taught me that the most valuable things you can grow aren't profits, they're connections. Connections to the earth, to food, to community, to the people you love." He looked at Mara, and his voice grew thick with emotion. "You gave me everything, Mara. A life that matters, children who know where food comes from, work that changes lives, and love that grows deeper every single season. To my wife, my partner, my teacher, and my best friend." Everyone raised their glasses, and Mara wiped tears from her eyes. "You're going to make me cry in front of everyone." "Good tears, I hope," he said, kissing her forehead. "The best tears." She stood and raised her own glass. "To Ethan, who proved that billionaires can have calloused hands and dirt under their nails, who took every seed I gave him and planted it with care, who built something beautiful because he was willing to start small and let it grow naturally. And to this family, this community, this life we've all grown together." They clinked glasses and drank, and then Lily asked if they could go check on the night-blooming flowers she had planted, and Marcus wanted to show his grandmother the new trellis he had designed, and the evening dissolved into the comfortable chaos of family life. Later, much later, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Mara and Ethan walked out into their garden under the stars. The night air was cool and smelled like earth and dying leaves, the scent of fall and endings and new beginnings. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, holding her hand as they walked between the beds they had planted. "I'm thinking about seeds," Mara said. "How you never know exactly what will grow when you plant them. You can predict, based on experience and knowledge, but every season is different. Every plant is unique. And the beautiful thing is not controlling the outcome. It's tending the process and being amazed by what emerges." "We grew something pretty amazing," Ethan said, looking back at the house where their children slept. "We did," Mara agreed, "and we're not done yet. There are still seeds to plant, still gardens to grow, still seasons ahead of us. What do you want to plant next?" It was the question he had asked her hundreds of times over the years, and it never got old. "I want to expand Lily's pollinator project. I want to help Marcus build that rainwater collection system he's been designing. I want to take on 3 more properties through the foundation and train 20 more farmers." She leaned into him, feeling his warmth against the cool night. "And I want to keep growing old with you, watching our children grow, getting our hands dirty and building something that lasts." "That's a good plan," Ethan said. "A really good plan." They stood in their garden under the vast canopy of stars. 2 people who had found each other through seeds and soil, who had built a life and a legacy around the simple act of planting things and watching them grow. The billionaire who had walked into a seed library looking for purpose had found so much more: love, family, community, and the deep satisfaction of work that mattered. And the woman who had dedicated her life to preserving seeds and teaching people to grow food had found a partner who valued her knowledge, supported her vision, and loved her with the steady, enduring devotion of a plant putting down roots in good soil. Together, they had proven that the most valuable things in life could not be bought or manufactured. They had to be planted, tended, and given time to grow. And when you started with good seeds and fertile ground, when you watered with patience and weeded with care, when you worked together through seasons of plenty and scarcity, what grew was more beautiful than anything you could have imagined. Their story was written in the rings of fruit trees they had planted, in the seeds saved and shared, in the children raised with dirt under their nails and love in their hearts, in the communities transformed by sustainable practices, and the knowledge that growing food was an act of hope and resistance and connection. As they walked back to their house, hands intertwined, the gardens around them whispered in the night breeze. Every plant they had placed in the ground, every seed they had saved, every harvest they had celebrated was a testament to what could grow when 2 people committed to building something real together. The seed library would continue its work long after them. The foundation would keep expanding, helping more communities reclaim their connection to the land. Their children would carry forward the lessons they had learned, teaching their own children about seeds and soil, and the patience required to grow things properly. But tonight, it was just the 2 of them, walking through the garden they had started 15 years ago with a handful of seeds and a billionaire's desperate need for something real. They had planted those seeds with hope, tended them with love, and watched as they grew into something more beautiful and abundant than either of them could have dreamed. "I love you," Mara said as they reached their porch. "I love you too," Ethan replied, pulling her close for a kiss that tasted like coming home. And in the morning, they would wake with the sun and walk through their gardens again, checking on plants and planning what to grow next, continuing the work that had brought them together and would sustain them for all the seasons still to come. Because some things, once planted in fertile ground and tended with care, never stopped growing. Love was like that. Family was like that. A life built on purpose and connection, and the simple act of putting seeds in soil and watching miracles emerge. They had planted everything, and love had grown. And it would keep growing, season after season, harvest after harvest, for as long as they continued to tend it together.